Welcome back to Honor Flight South Alabama, a special hour. There's always a different group of veterans to arrive at the World War II Memorial, but at the same time, there are the same people who are there to greet them after each flight.
I want to present this American flag that I had flown over the Capitol this morning in your honor. This flag represents you, and you represent the very best of America.
My parents were both World War II veterans, and they're both deceased. So in many ways, it gives me a chance on behalf of the people that I work for and represent, and the whole country really, to look into their eyes, but also to see my mom and dad, and to thank them for the kind of sacrifice that really is rarely seen these days.
Senators Jeff Sessions and Richard Shelby and Representative Joe Bonner welcome each Honor Flight South Alabama to the nation's capital. Each time, Bonner presents a proclamation at the Alabama column of the World War II Memorial.
I want to present a statement that I entered into the congressional record today.
For a lot of these vets, this trip is about striking up new relationships with colleagues they didn't even know during the war. And for others, it's a chance to rekindle some old friendships.
We're crew members together.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I was the pilot, I was the right gunner. We put 25 missions in together. And, just recounting all the things that happened.
Guys, did you know each other were going to be here today?
Yes, oh yes. JR told me he was going to come up with the honor flight, and I
He's
said,
from New Jersey.
I said, I'll make damn sure I get down to see it. This might be our last mission together.
Right.
This is the B-29, the plane you've been waiting for.
J.R. Elliott flew the B-29 bomber over the Pacific during the war. While dodging the not-so-friendly Japanese aircraft, Elliott says he was shot down by friendly fire after a case of mistaken identity.
You know, he bailed out once. He was shot down by the British.
He told me that story.
Oh, did he?
He told me he was shot down by the British.
I can't believe that story.
Well, it happened. I remember because I did it.
Convoy en route to Port Moresby. Troop ships in the Coral Sea with Americans and Australians bound for secret bases in New Guinea.
According to those who were there, the Pacific was a different kind of war, with a different kind of enemy.
The Japanese fighting forces were so fanatical. They had no value of death whatsoever.
Ken Crampton had been trained as a combat engineer to build bridges, but to his surprise, he was sent to the Pacific where few bridges were needed. He drew the task of rooting out Japanese soldiers from their underground spaces on Pacific islands.
And on some of those islands where they had time to fortify them underground, like Iwo Jima and Okinawa, well, they had everything underground, sleeping quarters, hospitals.
Crampton served at the Battle for Okinawa, but he also served on another small Pacific island, Aishimi, about 6 miles from Okinawa. He was there at the same time that famed war correspondent Ernie Pyle was killed.
Somebody put a picture in the paper, and everybody picked up on it here a few years back. Showed him laying on the side of the road like he was abandoned.
Crampton says that wasn't the case.
The engineers built a nice monument showing the 77th Division insignia. And everybody was assembled, and we gave him an honored burial.
There were others who rubbed shoulders with history makers. Bill Ferguson was a young Marine corporal stationed aboard the aircraft carrier USS Hornet. It's the same ship that launched a daring attack of B-25 bombers toward Tokyo, a squadron commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle.
I was working for the captain. When he came, that's when he introduced me to him and told him, he said, this fellow will do anything you want. He'll take you anywhere on the ship you want to go. And he told me to do it, and I said, yes, sir.
Doolittle planned the daring bombing raid on Tokyo, a mission about which several movies have been made. It involved specifically outfitted B-25 bombers that could take off from an aircraft carrier, something that had never been done. 16 hand-picked crews trained for only a couple of months to pull off the mission. Ferguson says they were VIPs on the Hornet.
He was given anything he wanted, and his men were too.
Ferguson watched those B-25s take off, destined for Japan, and crash landings in China. Afterward, the Hornet was off on other missions to Guadalcanal and New Caledonia, where a Japanese bomber took its toll. Ferguson and a buddy manned dual 20mm guns and fired at the plane.
I remember one plane coming down shooting machine gun bullets all around. When the bomb hit on me and sprayed me and all, it just slammed me on the deck.
Bill Ferguson was transferred to a hospital ship to treat his injuries, but his buddy was killed.
Bill Ferguson certainly isn't the first sailor to experience the sensation of having a ship shot out from under him. And many of the ships gained fame during the war because of the damage they sustained during battle and some of the great battles they were in. The Enterprise, Yorktown, Saratoga, all aircraft carriers, the backbone of the fleet. Among them also was the USS Lexington.
Real good. I ain't never been treated this good, you know.
Bernard Duffy was recently on the honor flight, but long before that, he was an original crew member aboard the Navy's premier aircraft carrier, the USS Lexington. The Japanese called her the Blue Ghost because it was the only ship in the fleet not camouflaged. Duffy was just feet from the torpedo explosion that almost sank her.
I was right in the middle of where the hole was, and it turned me for about 3 flips, and it messed my knees up.
During the 12-hour battle in the Marshall Islands, the Lexington endured relentless attacks from enemy aircraft.
We shot out about 360 Jap aircraft during that 12-hour period. Well, I counted 11 torpedoes that night. Some of them went under the ship, some went in front, some went in back.
But it only took one to cripple the ship with a 60-foot gash in her starboard side. The Lexington limped to port for repairs. But after his year on the ship, Duffy found himself in yet another hot spot in a naval support group on the island of Iwo Jima. He is one more in only a small group of Gulf Coast vets to witness the raising of the flag on Mount Suribachi.
When the sergeant come down from the top of it, he told me, he said, I took 263 men up that mountain, 26 of them walked down. That's how many was shot up there. That flag raising cost them a lot of men.
As the Pacific War raged, the surface ships like the Lexington fought back bombers, kamikazes, and torpedoes. Beneath the surface, the U.S. was engaged in its own silent war, and Wally Sabin was at the heart of it.
In the first patrol we made, first 2 patrols, we sunk 29,000 some tons.
And if he had to do it over again, Sabin says it would be on a submarine. Sabin says he tried to enlist in the Navy for submarine service out of high school, but he was told he was too short.
And then I talked to my family doctor. He says, Wally, you just lay on the floor for a few months and stretch out at night. And that's what I did.
And it worked. When he went back, they took him off to sometimes grueling physical and mental training to be on submarines, training where many washed out. He was finally put on a boat, just like the USS Drum at Battleship Park. The very nature of a submarine is to operate undetected, and Sabin got very close to the enemy in the Sea of Japan.
Made a patrol on that. We rescued a pilot that was, you could see the shore, how close to the shore we were when we picked him up and got out of there. We fired on by shore batteries and stuff like that.
Well, submarines have long been romanticized by some, but there's another naval vessel that is also somewhat exotic. It was fast and it was dangerous, and according to at least one vet, somewhat glamorous.
The PT boat, small vessels surprisingly made of heavily reinforced plywood hulls. They were made famous by President John F. Kennedy's service on them, and Ken Marshall served aboard PT 237 in the South Pacific.
We patrolled the Solomons, New Guinea, Palau.
Marshall says the PTs patrolled only at night. He says, in fact, the only time his boat got hit was when they patrolled in the daylight, so they stopped doing that. The PTs were fast and lethal, but Marshall dispels the myth that they were glamorous.
It's kind of like submarines. You say you're on a submarine, man, that's glamorous. PTs are glamorous, but they were just a small boat with a whole lot of guns on them.
When we come back, meet some of the women who put off family life for a while to better serve their country. And a little bit later, they're the stars of a generation. And for at least one night, they're the stars of South Alabama.